Hello, I'm Joe Mahler, and I want to thank you for letting me take a few minutes to tell a few of my Dennis stories. Now, almost any story you tell about Dennis is going to involve food. That's just who he was, and this one certainly does. I met Dennis when he took some fly casting lessons from me, and we quickly hit it off and had some great conversation. He invited me to dinner at Blue Point, his restaurant here in Fort Myers. And I was happy to go. We went there and he made a few recommendations, and so I'm sitting there eating my salmon and asparagus or whatever it was, and slowly out of the corner of my eye I see this hand come in, take a bite of my salmon, come in, take a few of asparagus. Next thing I know, the hands came in and dropped a few green beans on my plate. I thought, well, maybe it's his restaurant, maybe that's how it goes. Well, with Dennis, I quickly found out anything on the table was fair game. I wasn't quite used to this, but it actually worked pretty well. As time went on, we would do some cooperative ordering. He would say, okay, well, you get this because it comes with potato salad, and I'll give you some of my fries. And so the food became the event. Even a hot dog and Coke at Costco became an event. We had great times. Dennis would always bring food on fishing trips. He'd bring a little bit of fishing equipment, but he'd usually say, well, you've got equipment, right? And I'd say, oh yeah. Well, he'd show up, and Dennis never ate much, certainly not in the last few years, and he'd come with a cooler and a bag with handles on it, and he'd have sandwiches and pickles and chips, and he was pretty famous down here in Florida for his beautifully crafted sandwiches. I remember one time that I had told somebody about that, and we went out with Dennis, and Dennis apparently was running short on time, so stopped at Jersey Mike's and got some subs, and what a disappointment that was. We all wanted Dennis to cater the fishing. Dennis actually loved fishing, but what he really loved was watching his friends have fun. Many times he'd bring somebody down from Michigan or someplace, or maybe it was the mechanic that fixed his car the week before, and he'd bring him out on the boat and he'd say, Joe, I want you to show these guys this place, or I want you to help them with their casting or whatever. Dennis oftentimes wouldn't pick up a rod, never fished. When he did, he was very skilled, but what he really enjoyed was watching other people enjoy themselves. There was one time that we were fishing in Dinkins Bayou with a friend of mine, and Dennis hooked and landed the most beautiful flounder I've ever seen. It's the biggest one. I've never caught one like this, and I was pretty excited to get it in the net and get it in the boat, and Dennis looked at it and he goes, I could get 20 bucks a pound for that thing with potato. Now, I've never looked at a fish that way, but it was a different perspective. Now, that photograph from Dinkins Bayou, that flounder, is the only photo that I have of Dennis where he's holding a fish and wearing his shirt. Dennis was notorious for fishing without his shirt. We'd get in the boat and the shirt would come off and he'd fish. So one day, you know, I said, Dennis, keep your shirt on. I want to get a few shots today for an article or maybe to use on my website. Oh yeah, great. I look around, Dennis has got his shirt off, fishing away. He told me it was a Greek thing, and I'll take his word for that. The irony is, Dennis, I know, owned at least 24 shirts, and I know that because I'm the one that purchased them. One day we were leaving Bass Pro Shop after having lunch. Now, I worked with Bass Pro Shop for about 10 years doing seminars and classes and that sort of thing, and I mentioned to him that I got a 40% discount. He said, 40%? He goes, well, why wouldn't I get more? I said, well, yeah, shoot, go ahead. He walked over to the rack. He grabbed every color in that style, long sleeve and short sleeve. I checked out that day with 10 shirts that were absolutely not my size. I always felt that Dennis saw the world through a Dutch angle. A Dutch angle in photography or cinema is an angle where the horizon is thrown out of kilter, kind of like you cock your head, which he kind of did. Dennis always had a different perspective. That angle adds intrigue to the most mundane scenes, and whether it was where wheat came from or radial tires or whatever it was, Dennis added interest and intrigue to the most mundane things. Dennis never tried to disguise who he was or even hide his flaws. In fact, a lot of times he'd start a story with, I might be making this up, and sometimes he was, but there was always interesting and always fun. A lot of times we remember the last things, the last conversation we had with someone, and certainly I do. You know, we had just a month or so ago we had talked when he got the news that the cancer was back, and we had a long conversation. Of course, he had his sense of humor, but we were talking pretty seriously about, you know, the inevitable and some details about that. And, you know, he told me he loved me, and I told him I loved him, and we hung up the phone. Well, 2 hours later, the phone rings. It says, "Dennis Serras." I pick it up, and I said, "Hello." He goes, "Yeah, what?" He goes, "Hey, you butt dialed me." "No, wait, I butt dialed you." "Never mind." And that's how I'm going to remember Dennis. If somebody asked me to describe Dennis, I think I'd have to say, you just had to be there. Thank you.